All right, sure, thank you. We do have a breaking update this morning to a story that we've been following for years. The former chairwoman of the New Hanover County Board of Commissioners will not face charges after a criminal investigation. Documents obtained by WECT just before midnight show the results of the case against Julia Olson-Boseman. The man named Gary Holyfield had accused her of stealing $20,000. Now he says he hired her to represent him in a lawsuit following the death of his daughter back in 2020. But he says Olson-Boseman never filed a lawsuit. A prosecutor with the Conference of District Attorneys now says the $20,000 was a non-refundable retainer fee and part of Holyfield's agreement with Olson-Boseman. He says there's not enough evidence to prove the former commissioner meant to deceive him. Olson-Boseman was disbarred by the North Carolina State Bar last month. She surrendered her law license last year, saying she would not be able to defend against the allegations against her.